My name is David Garside and I am Head of Collections with the Duxford Aviation Society Museum. I am a retired civil engineer and past chairman of the Society. The only contact I had with the aviation industry during my career was surveying the end of Manchester Airport runway before its first extension in the 1960s, when aircraft such as these were still flying and now form part of our collection. We have a number of retired airline pilots and others from the industry amongst our volunteers, but the majority of us, whilst having a keen interest in aviation, do not have an aviation background. The Duxford Aviation Society Museum achieved accreditation in April 2022. The museum is located within the IWM Duxford site and is in effect a museum within a museum. The Society has been on the Duxford site since 1975 and has supported its progressive development into the world-famous aviation museum it has now become. In the early years, the Society had a significant role in the operation of the site, with members organising air shows, operating the airfield fire brigade and site security, as well as carrying out aircraft conservation work. Over time, as the site developed and the scale of these activities increased, the use of volunteers became inappropriate and they were gradually handed over to professional IWM staff. The IWM is of course primarily concerned with military history and with the conservation and maintenance of military aircraft, such as these. At some time during the 1970s, it was agreed that the Duxford Aviation Society would differentiate itself by building up a collection of British civil airliners, and the first of these, the de Havilland Comet IV, arrived in 1975. The museum is now home to 13 historic British airliners branded the British Airliner Collection. The airliners themselves range from an Avro York to a BAE 146 and include a pre-production Concorde. We have a formal partnership agreement with the IWM, giving us security of tenure. Concorde and our new History of British Civil Aviation Museum is open every day, and our other aircraft are open as often as possible, dependent on the availability of volunteer stewards. Important benefits associated with our location on the IWM site are access to many visitors, large areas of concrete hard standing for our 7 airliners parked outside, and covered accommodation for the other 5 in the airspace hangar. The primary disbenefit is being located behind the IW entrance with no direct proportion of the gate receipts, although we do receive a modest lump sum to help with the cost of maintaining Concorde. To provide adequate funds to maintain the whole collection, therefore, we have had to find other ways of generating income in agreement with the IWM. The majority of our income comes from the sale of boarding passes on airshow and flying days, giving access to the whole fleet, and by the sale of second-hand aviation books as well as donations and inheritances. We also raise income from private business and social events and from filming contracts, as well as online sales of surplus aircraft parts not relevant to the collection. Our primary objective is to document and illustrate the history of British civil aviation since World War II, and this is reflected in our collections development policy as shown on this slide. The extraordinary technical developments of the post-World War II era are highlighted by the Avro York and Concorde, located as they are next to one another in the airspace hangar. Just 25 years separate the first flights of these two aircraft types. The former, based on the Avro Lancaster bomber, first flew in 1944 and cruised at a speed of some 250 miles an hour at a height of 20,000 feet. Whilst Concorde first flew in 1969 and regularly achieved 1,350 miles per hour at 60,000 feet, crossing the Atlantic with 100 passengers and crew in around 3 hours. Most of our airliners were flown into Duxford at the end of their flying careers, but 4 were dismantled and brought to site by road. These 4 were the subject of long-term major restoration projects which form the subject of separate presentations in their own right. But this is the flight deck of the Ambassador taken during and after restoration. The experience and facilities needed for such extensive works are no longer available, and it's unlikely that any more such projects can be undertaken. At one time, experienced volunteers could be recruited from retiring aviation industry personnel, but any such people still willing to commit the time prefer now to work on historic aircraft still in flying condition. The skilled technical conservation work involves metal fabrication, woodworking, seat reupholstering, scaffolding erection and the use of hydraulic hoists and other equipment requiring users to have appropriate certification. Typical jobs might involve replacing cabin windows or changing undercarriage parts, but much of the work required to maintain our aircraft in satisfactory condition involves more common tasks such as painting, cleaning, or repairs to damaged fixtures and fittings. Where we lack expertise, we will employ a specialist contractor, and the Society attempts to ensure that sufficient funds are retained and available to pay for such work in the future. The provision of covered accommodation for 13 large historic airliners would be prohibitively expensive, even if planning permission could be obtained for suitable hangars at Duxford, where much of the site is a designated conservation area. These World War I hangars, shown here, are now over 100 years old. As mentioned earlier, 5 of our airliners are located in the airspace hangar at Duxford, where they are protected from the weather, with the other 7 being outside on the airfield apron. The choice of aircraft moved into airspace in 2006 was influenced in part by their likely popularity with visitors, such as Concorde, and in part by the fact that some of them had been restored with help from the Heritage Lottery Fund on condition they were subsequently kept under cover. The care and maintenance programme for the fleet as a whole has been designed to retain the aircraft in a condition as close to original as long as possible. The maintenance regime is clearly quite different for the 2 groups of aircraft. For those in airspace, the focus has been on protecting them from damage caused by the large number of visitors accessing the aircraft and providing a more interesting visitor experience, whereas for those outside, the primary focus is on protecting them from damage caused by the weather. The airliners in airspace include the pre-production Concorde, donated to the Duxford Aviation Society by the government of the day in 1975, a Comet 4, the first jet-powered airliner to carry fare-paying passengers non-stop across the Atlantic in 1958, an Avro York used in the Berlin airlift, a Handley Page Hermes and a de Havilland Dove, the first British airliner to be produced after the war, which is hung from the hangar ceiling. Work on the Dove is confined to a periodic dusting and statutory checks on the cables and hangars supporting the aircraft, which are carried out for us as part of the IWM's programme. Maintenance of the other 4 is focused primarily on the protection of the airframe from the effects of visitors. It is estimated, for example, that over 10 million visitors have walked through Concorde since its arrival in 1977. Work has included the installation of false floors to relieve the load on the airframe floor, the periodic replacement of floor coverings worn out by constant use, and the reupholstering of seats where the public are allowed to sit. Also, the installation and maintenance of items needed to meet relevant safety regulations, such as appropriate lighting, emergency exit signs, smoke alarms, turnstiles to control visitors, and a public address system. Over the past 10 years, we have improved the visitor experience by bringing some life back to our exhibits. With the help of a group of ex-Concorde engineers called Heritage Concorde, we have restored the operation of the iconic Concorde droop nose. We have restored the flight deck instrument lighting, the operation of the landing lights, and installed a soundtrack of the crew making a typical takeoff and landing from Heathrow. We demonstrate the nose droop as part of a mock takeoff and landing to visitors monthly. The frequency of demonstrations is limited deliberately to respect the age of the original hydraulic and mechanical systems controlling the operation of the nose. The interior of the Avro York has been equipped to represent its use in the Berlin airlift, where it famously carried the 100,000th ton of stores into the city. Over the past 3 years, as part of our successful accreditation application, we have converted the interior of the Handley Page Hermes into our Civil Aviation Museum. This sets out the history of British civil aviation using illuminated panels and includes a live Flight Radar 24 screen showing the current position of airliners in flight and a video of Concorde in service. Visitors are given access to the original 5-man cockpit, showing just how far technical developments have improved flight safety and efficiency, and they are allowed to sit in seats originating from a variety of historic aircraft, which appeals to both younger and older visitors for different reasons. This decision was made because visitors are not normally allowed to sit in seats on the other airliners to avoid damage. It was considered reasonable to allow this in the museum, recognizing that these seats would need periodic reupholstering. Maintenance of the aircraft located outside is focused on protection from the elements. Here we have a unique airspeed ambassador from the 1950s, a Vickers Viscount, the oldest turboprop airliner in the world, a Bristol Britannia, Vickers VT-10, Hawker Siddeley Trident, the first airliner with automatic landing equipment, a BAC-111 and a Britten-Norman Trolander, and as of this year, a BAE-146 recently decommissioned from the Royal No. 32 Squadron of the RAF and used by the late Queen. Most of the aircraft interiors are retained in the original layout at the time they were donated, but some seats are often removed to allow for the installation of display cabinets. These may show various aspects of the history of the aircraft, such as its design and development, service history and passenger experiences. Internal maintenance includes routine cleaning and vacuuming of the seats and carpets, particularly during the summer when visitors have been on board. A program of more detailed cleaning of flight decks and other facilities is carried out as necessary. Occasional repairs to the interior arising from wear and tear is also carried out as and when required. External maintenance is based on a planned program of work designed to maintain the airframe in a safe condition for access by visitors. The exterior is washed once a year to remove airborne pollution, with dust and dirt settling on the roofs and wing surfaces, particularly from traffic fumes and rubber particles arising from the adjacent M11. To maintain and protect the aircraft, a sound coat of paint is vital, and each aircraft is stripped and repainted approximately every 7 years. For health and safety reasons, we can't spray paint without the appropriate facilities, and the type of paint used is also tightly controlled given its use by amateur volunteers. We have found that a team of volunteers can strip and repaint an aircraft such as this 111 in 12 to 14 days. It is our policy to ensure that all aircraft can be towed on their own landing gear to ensure they can access hangars for maintenance or be relocated on site. It's important therefore to maintain tyres to the appropriate pressures and to replace them on occasion as the rubber deteriorates over time. Bird droppings are a constant problem, and any orifice has to be blocked off to prevent birds nesting. Undercarriage housings are particularly prone to this, and netting has to be installed and maintained to protect these areas. Ultraviolet light affects cabin window material over time, leading to crazing and discoloration. The supply of replacement windows is often obtained from similar aircraft that has been scrapped, although this source is obviously becoming more difficult. Despite the primary material in an airframe being aluminium, corrosion is an ongoing problem, and a continuous program of corrosion removal and repainting is a permanent task for 4 volunteer conservation teams who work on different days during the week. A condition of accepting the BAE 146 this year was that we disposed of one of our existing aircraft so as not to increase the overall number of airliners on the site. The aircraft chosen for disposal, the Handley Page Herald, was offered to other aviation museums free of charge and found a home at a museum near Inverness. Over some 2 months, the aircraft was dismantled and transported by road to Scotland on low loaders. Whilst it was very disappointing to have to dispose of an aircraft, it shows that the collection can be adapted and changed over time, and any exhibit deteriorating to the point where it is no longer safe might be dismantled and replaced with an alternative. Whilst conservation skills are becoming scarce and increasingly difficult to replace, the recruitment of stewards to welcome and interpret the exhibits for visitors is not expected to be a problem for the foreseeable future, and their knowledge can easily be increased given the vast amount of literature on the history of civil aviation that is available. Looking to the future, it is difficult to estimate how long the airliners might survive. Clearly those under cover can last as long as they are of interest to visitors, but those outside are particularly dependent upon the effectiveness of the maintenance programme. This in turn will be affected by the retention of appropriate skills, the availability of funds, and the willingness of volunteers to continue with the conservation work.